Good morning, good morning. All right, so we are returning back to Hawn's Mill, Tragedy and Truth, and what happened. And so we were talking about how they were moving in. The people that were there were extremely rough-hewn people from society. There was such cultural differences because so many members of the church were from the north versus the people from the south, that their cultures were so different. As most northerners depicted southerners, they considered them to be quite indolent and lazy. And I'm trying to think of anything else that was... I went off quite a bit about Thomas Sowell and his book, Conquests and Cultures. Let me show you what that looks like here. Oh, yeah. If you haven't, this is 5,000 Year Leap by Skousen, which is awesome. But Thomas Sowell, Conquests and Cultures. And I was explaining that it does not matter where you come from or what part of the world. It all comes down to what group culture pervades to determine the success of a nation or group. And so, and you can have subgroups just because you're in America or in Europe or in wherever. You can have subgroups within that can be good or bad, because let's take, you have on whole a nation that is doing well because of the culture that it has, and then you are part of a group that has a subculture that is even more beneficial. You can excel in whatever nation you're in. You can also do the opposite. You can be in a generally good nation and have a subculture that specifically is less or not going to be as good. And because of that, you will suffer the results of that. Anyway, all really, really cool stuff about trying to figure out, okay, what's going on? Why did these neighbors finally start going after one another? I showed a map how they kind of settled in on the southern side of the Missouri River and was able to start there, and they had the Temple lot near Independence. On the north side of the river, there's Liberty. So just these two twin small towns next to each other. And so, yeah, interesting stuff. The doctrine of gathering was a cardinal principle of the early Mormon faithful, and was intended not only for the saints to gather to build the temple, but also to prepare for the Lord's second coming, and to be saved from the world's impending perils. Joseph Smith's revelations and Phelps's editorial in The Star were vigorous instruments of gathering. Go ye out from Babylon, and flee unto Zion for safety, proclaimed two revelations given in 1835. The first issue of the Evening and Morning Star quickly circulated this message to the eastern branches and encouraged the members to gather to Zion before the end of the world cometh. By 1833, Phelps had often reminded his readers of these warnings and urged others to come. He would write that many had already gathered to Zion to meet the Lord when he comes. This appeal was powerful. 400 had arrived in western Jackson County by July 1832, and 1,200 the following July. Okay, just remember, the first missionaries, this is how fast this was. 1831, first missionaries, right? And then after that, by this time, 400 by July 1832. So a year and a half later, because they started in winter. I don't know if that was at the end of the year or the beginning of the year. That was January. So it is a year and a half, and 400 members have gathered. In super small towns, that's a big deal, okay? Imagine 1/3 of your population just already exploding in a new group that just came by, okay? Followed by which, By 1833, they reminded these warnings, etc. By July 1832, and 1,200 by the following July. So they've tripled their numbers, right? 400, 400, 400. So you get 800 more to get 1,200. And by that time, they are probably half, if not more, than the current population that was there. Because those are just really quick, rough estimates, right? And they're all this group that are coming in. Yeah, very unsettling. Speaking of small towns and small town politics, there's all sorts of stuff to go on about that, but let's see when it applies. So, 1,200 by the following July. The church got crazy to go up to Zion, exclaimed John Corrill. The disgruntled citizens cringed as each season pours forth its swarms among us, says Robert Johnson, a citizen who watched the saints sometimes import their poorest members. The members were greater than Bishop Partridge could accommodate, and he had to reduce the stewardship inheritance to 10 acres or to nothing. And sometimes it was on the most undesirable land, said John McCoy, who lived near the Mormons in Caw Township. Consequently, as the saints continued arriving, said Corrill, the people arose in their fury. Yeah. The members of the church, however, were told not to gather unprepared and to remain in their eastern branches until they had adequate means to consecrate to the bishop in Missouri. Be wise, and do not build air castles of false expectations, Phillips cautioned. Moreover, those who arrived should have done so only after receiving a recommend from 3 elders and their eastern branch or the bishop at Kirtland, but many failed to do. Do not let your flight be in haste, but let all things be prepared before you. The editor of the Star in July 1833 boldly cautioned. However, by this late date, there were already insufficient means to plant poor in their inheritance, warned Phelps. Some of the poor, both men and women, acquired domestic and farm labor from the citizens, work that was otherwise usually done only by slaves. A few also acquired work from the McCoys, who continued to survey the Indian lands. Well, thanks, guy. Anyway, so they're literally doing the work no one would want to do, apparently. The rush of immigration and other administrative issues caused conflict with the leaders in Ohio. Misunderstandings and administrative power struggles brought matters to a point of near crisis. A revelation in November 1832 advised the leaders in Missouri that God would send one mighty and strong to lead them or to replace anyone who put forth his hand to study the ark of God. Oliver Cowdery said the prophet told him that this revelation was given only as a general caution to those in high standing, but some took offense, and the problems continued. By January 1833, saddened over conditions in the church in Missouri, I'm wondering if they mean saddened by over conditions, anyway, but by January 1833, so 2 years since missionaries came to the forefront, saddened by over conditions in the church in Missouri, Orson Hyde and Hiram Smith, representing Joseph Smith, and a council of high priests at Kirtland, wrote, "We feel more like weeping over Zion than we do like rejoicing." Their letter continued, "If the people of Zion did not repent, the Lord would seek another place and another people." Meanwhile, in order to help resolve difficulties between the two centers and better coordinate church business, in April 1832, Joseph Smith and his newly appointed counselors, Sidney Rigdon and Jesse Gauss, along with Bishop Newell K. Whitney, traveled to Missouri to sit in council with the brethren in Zion. They met both to resolve past conflicts and to establish a new business enterprise, or everlasting establishment, and firm unto my church. The new firm was intended to better manage the literary and mercantile establishment of my church and other properties, and to better provide for the church poor, stated the revelation. On April 26th, at Independence, after some of the differences of the past had been settled, and the hearts of all run together in love, the brethren were joined together as partners in the church's new management company, named the United Firm. This new organization, with Joseph Smith as its leader, was designed to regulate all church financial interests, Ohio and Missouri lands, and the bishop's storehouses, while applying the principles of consecration and stewardship to the firm and its officers. Its leaders were to manage their own stewardship and firm and be supported by it, as well as help the church pay off its increasing debts. Okay, so there's a lot here that's interesting, because the prophecy about one mighty and strong is still bandied about today. And, if you listened to my one prophecy key to the future, you can understand that for some people they still think that's on the horizon. It could be. That's the funny thing. When it comes to prophecy, I'm perfectly understanding that you can take some future revelator, some future seer. They will look back on the past and say, "Wait a minute, this is fulfilled. Don't you see how this was fulfilled this way?" They could retroactively say, "No, that the whole one mighty and strong was meant to be this person here, so that's taken care of." And that could happen with something like, imagine you have someone who comes and stays and takes over and works with what's happening in Missouri, and then life continues on, and then a prophet comes in and says, "Oh yeah, remember that prophecy Joseph Smith said? That was about this person." So there's a lot of times where I think we don't recognize these signs of the times because they just seem so natural to us. And so it very well could be that someone who was mighty and strong did come, or that he's not going to come, and that's okay because it was not needed. Or as it's stated, that maybe it was used for someone else. Anyway, after Joseph Smith organized the United Firm at Independence and returned to Kirtland, his attention turned to developing plans for building the New Jerusalem. In 1833, the leaders at Kirtland sent Partridge, Cowdery, and others at Independence a set of building instructions and drawings, including a plat map for their proposed new city and sketches for 24 temples, houses of the Lord, or community buildings, to be constructed on the 63-acre temple lot. In August, leaders sent another set of drawings and instructions that amended the first, and enlarged both the size of the proposed city and the size of the temples. The package also included instructions specifying the sequence of constructing the first 3 buildings. Regarding the 24 buildings, the schedule directed leaders first to construct 3 houses of the Lord, following the same plan Joseph Smith had designed for Kirtland. They were to speedily build the first temple to be a schoolhouse, including a chapel for worship and learning, with architectural designs and interior similar to that of the Kirtland Temple. Then, near it, build an office building for the church's first presidency, and next a printing house. The latter 2 structures were to follow the first as soon as means can be obtained. The prophet wrote, as means can be obtained, the prophet wrote. Ground was never broken for any of them, however, because of the lack of funds and rising hostility. This is where we get this famous plat picture. The one where it has the center of the temple and such there, and the changing orientation of the stuff around it. Objections to the Mormons by local citizens soon increased with intensity and in variety. While some complained of the nuisance of the gathering and sometimes accompanying poverty, the others complained of the outward manifestations of spiritual gifts and expressed other concerns. Well, that's interesting. Let me go ahead and... There's a bunch of really cool paintings in this picture. It says, Contrary to counsel, the Saints moved to Jackson County faster than the lands and means could be prepared for them. There are tempers simmered among local settlers until finally July 1833, violence erupted against the Latter-day Saints. One of the mob's first targets was the printing press, and July 20th, 1833, that a mob dragged Bishop Edwards and Partridge Charles Allen into the public square in Independence and ordered them to denounce their religion or leave the county. When they refused to do either, they were tarred and feathered by the mob. So here are the painting and depictions of it. That's Saints moving before it was ready, the printing press being thrown out, and them being mobbed. So, back to them complaining about spiritual gifts. This is going to be interesting. Reverend Benton Pixley wrote that the Mormons pretended to the gifts of miracles, of tongues, and of healing their sick, visions. They were visionary enthusiasts, said John C. Oh, that's a different one. So they pretended to the gifts of miracles, of tongues, of healing their sick, visions. They were visionary enthusiasts, said John C. McCoy, who spoke of their exclusiveness and assumption of holiness. Alexander Majors, whose father later rode with the mobs, said the Mormons were good citizens, but they sometimes in their meetings spoke in tongues, then waited for another to rise and give an interpretation. The Mormons believed that these were sincere expressions of the principle known on the day of Pentecost. Accordingly, by the summer of 1833, Phelps said, "Everyone that is a saint, or nearly so, speaks in tongues." Ooh, there's a lot I want to say on this, because this is an interesting contrast of things. Like, okay, let's go through these. Pretend to the gift of miracles. I would hold back on that. The reason why is because visionary enthusiasts, that's fine. You're living in a time where it's the Spirit is really being poured out on people again. And if you're listening to the Spirit, you're having dreams, you're having visions. Yeah, you are. I'm a firm believer in the gifts of the Spirit in the church. I do believe them in specific ways. Okay? Receiving dreams and visions? Yes. I've had experiences with these kind of things, and especially from collecting people's stories. So I don't fault them that. The one that I'm just like, that I understand that's, there's two things in their accusations that bother me. What's interesting is they say they're good citizens, but, and then they're like, their assumption of holiness, right? Where was that? They sometimes in the meetings spoke to tons. They were good citizens, but the one where he's like, they're good citizens, but someone comes in and speaks, and then weirdly, and then someone else stands up, and that one, I have received many miraculous stories about people who were able to immediately speak completely fluently in the language that they needed to on their mission. I have had stories that I've collected where people understood languages they never spoke miraculously in times of great stress and great need. Literally like the day on Pentecost. Remember, the day of Pentecost, people spoke in tongues, meaning they spoke something, and people on the other end of hearing that understood what they were saying in their own language. This isn't you stand up and speak gibberish and someone says, oh, this is what this person meant. I can understand the outflowing of good feeling and trying to feel the Spirit that way. I don't think that's the gift of tongues. I just sincerely do not. There's two marks of that tell me that when you stand up in a church and just blabber something and wait for someone to stand up and interpret it by their feeling from the Spirit, I understand. It's a spiritual connection kind of thing. That's not the part that I'm worried about. The two parts that I'm worried about is one, it's being consumed on their lusts. What was the point of that manifestation? The point of that manifestation was so that they could show that they were feeling the Spirit really strongly. I just do not think that that's really what the gift of tongues is for and when it appears. It's just, and so it bothers me when, because it's, to me, it's a holdover from those who were, I think it's Pentecostals. Makes sense, I mean, because of the name. But that was something that they brought in with them when they converted. That's what I suspect. And then when you see people, if you think of everyone who's a convert to the church during this time, they were coming from whatever religion they had beforehand and coming and mixing it in here. And so if you were never used to seeing this and suddenly you started seeing this, you'll have likely one of two general approaches. One is that you're like, whoa, this is a lot crazier than I thought, and maybe leave the church. I don't know. Or you'd sit there and go, wait a minute, this is really cool. This is really where it's happening. No wonder this is the church. And then you start developing it as well. So, do I absolutely believe in the gift of tongues? 100%. And the interpretation thereof. There is too much I've seen to sit there and deny that. But this one where they talk about them just standing up in their own churches and doing that, that's the one that bothers me. And it's because I do not see the Lord's purpose or hand in it other than it being a way to... It's just, I don't think these gifts come as a way to consume it upon your lusts. I just don't. I think that's the easiest, best way to put it. I would also say, like healing, oh yeah. Oh yes. There are, again, collect enough stories and have enough experiences, and you realize the gift of healing is absolutely true. For someone who is a cynical onlooker, it can appear untrue, because you can sit there and think, well, these guys just had a cold, and so they're just getting up and going. And sometimes maybe that's all that's needed. But there are other times where there's... I suspect they're going to share the story of the young boy who was shot in the leg. That's very common from Hawn's Mill. His hip is just destroyed. And his mother receives revelation to put things together to make a poultice, so herbs and other stuff, mash it up, put it in the wound to help it heal, and it regrew the cartilage there. It's going to be amazing. So yeah, there are absolutely miracles that occur. Are they oftentimes the way we think they're supposed to be? No. I know a lot of people are like, oh yeah, gift of tongues is just learning on the mission. I'm like, oh no. There's a lot more that's a lot more miraculous. Although that's part of it. I'm not going to deny it. But I think that there's a really weird mixed bag, because I'm trying to say, look, gifts of the Spirit that are strong and miraculous and like truly, like there is no real good explanation here other than God's intervention, kind of miracles. And then there's the subtle and kind type, the ones where he puts things, the right people in the right place in the right way, that happen all the time. The ones where if you're cynical or critical, you're just like, whatever, that was just coincidence. Sure, there's plenty of that too. But then I'm sitting here warning against, don't sit there and try and consume these miracles on your lust. They're given to you at the time when they're needed for the purpose of helping people, whether that's yourself or others. So that's my warning. That's my aside on that. So some complained of Mormons being overzealous in their claim for the land. This is also a problem. John McCoy reported that Abel Pryor, whom he considered to be a garrulous old fanatic, and other Mormons like him spoke hundreds of times of the land being theirs. Your tract, Pryor said to Isaac McCoy, is included in my inheritance, and in the Lord's own good time I will possess it. David Whitmer said that some of his branch members were continually making boasts to the Jackson County people. Oh dear. My cat's knocked things down. I'll have to take care of that in a bit. So they were talking about how they would possess it. David Whitmer said that some of his branch members were continually making boasts to the Jackson County people that excited bitter jealousy. Still, other citizens complained about the future political control of the Mormons. It requires no gift of prophecy to tell that the day is not far distant when the civil government of the country will be in their hands, wrote Robert Johnson, a citizen leader. When the problem arose over local slavery in July 1833, and a concern grew that Mormons were encouraging immigration of free people of color, Phelps instructed his people to shun every appearance of evil. Nevertheless, Isaac McCoy said Mormons were filling this new country with a people among whom others could not live. The younger McCoy added that the condition gradually created a feeling of bitter hostility against them. Finally, by the summer of 1833, the discontent of the old citizens grew furious. 2 years. 2 years. 2 years is all it took. So, you had members coming in, tons of them, where you could see that they were going to take over the local government. You could see that they were inviting people that they didn't want there, which is their own racial problem. Oh, geez, these cats are getting terrible. Guys. I'm going to have to, I'm sorry, this one's really, really short. But I'm going to have to cut it short so I can clean up after them. Yeah, maybe not. I thought they were going after the cheese. They're just running around crazy. So it took 2 years for them to have open hostilities. That's how fast it changed. This is sobering, right? Here you have, from the people in Missouri's perspective, you have people moving here, a lot of them who don't have enough to start anything. And they're so poor they're willing to do work that was to be done by slaves, but then be paid for it. They are assuming that they're going to receive everything, including your household. They're doing gifts of the Spirit, which, if you're cynical, you don't believe in, and find that the writing and such that they would claim such things. And then they start politically asking people to come in, and it's not what you want politically. So yeah, there's going to be an outbreak of hostilities. What have you got? Oh, he's just wanting to play. I found an egg. An Easter egg. Probably from decorations. That I don't mind. All right. Outbreak of hostilities. Here's where it starts. After several minor disturbances against the saints, such as brick batting houses and burning haystacks. That's minor? In civilized society, that would not be okay. Brick batting, I assume, what is brick batting? I'd assume they'd take bricks, put them in a pillowcase, and smack the house with them. And do things that way. Let's take a look. What is brick batting? A piece of fragment or brick, especially a piece of brick, used as a missile. Corn blend to assail with pieces of brick. The mob brick batted the police. So yeah, I think they just threw bricks at them. Jeez. Okay, the problem with burning haystacks is when you're homesteading, you think, well, it wasn't their home, or and there are haystacks that would just light on fire, because if you gather up a bunch of hay, you pile it on there, if there's the right moisture content, and the bacteria in there start breaking things down. It becomes hotter and hotter to the point that it spontaneously combusts into flame. There are haystack fires that are like that. Okay, but on the other hand, you can just light the haystack on fire. Why is this a problem? Well, the hay is used for all your animals. And so you're basically trying to starve their animals and their hard work out, because hay is the green, wonderful grass that's built up, that has all those nutrients. Cut it down while it still has those nutrients in it, so before it becomes the yellow straw for your animals to feed on. And it will retain that in there. And yeah, just want to starve them out, basically. Except instead of starving the people out, you're starving their animals out. It makes life harder for them by a whole lot.
Can I do a side comment really fast? If you starve the animals, then you're also starving the humans, because they also need the animals.
Yeah. So, those are minor, apparently. A committee of town and county leaders met July 18th, 1833, and wrote a manifesto designed to remove the Mormons from the county. Peaceably, if we can, it declared, forcibly, if we must. 2 days later, on July 20th, a crowd of 400 or 500 men met at the courthouse square and ordered the Mormons to leave the county. To show its determination to remove them, the mob demonstrated violently against the Saints, damaging the Phelps printing house and family apartment, and scattering the papers of the Book of Commandments into the streets. The mob threatened destruction of the Gilbert store, and tarred and feathered Bishop Edward Partridge and Charles Allen at the north front of the courthouse to further emphasize their contempt. 3 days later, the mob convened again and forcibly imposed an agreement on the Mormon leaders. Half of them were to leave by the following January, and the rest of the Saints by next April, with assurance that peace would exist. With an assurance peace would exist until they left the county. They were literally forcing them out. Remember, they were on the frontier of America, but they were Americans. They were enacting this against other Americans that had come. They were just part of a specific religious sect and creed they didn't agree with. Culturally, they didn't agree with them. And politically, they didn't agree with them. The Mormons petitioned Missouri Governor Daniel Dunklin, who advised the Mormons to seek redress through the courts, expecting that the law would bring them justice. The Mormons hired several Liberty attorneys to assist them. However, after the citizens learned that the Mormons intended to challenge their forced agreement in the courts, the mobs began to attack the Mormon settlements. Late on the evening of October 31st, a mob rode into the Whitmer settlement, whipped the men, terrorized the women and children, and ripped the roofs off of 10 houses. At David Whitmer's home, a mob member dragged Julia Whitmer by her hair from her house, then destroyed her home. Lydia Whitting said that as the women and children were fleeing into the woods to escape the mob, they were frightened nearly out of their senses. Philo Dibble, who lived a mile away near the Lewises, later said that the men were being whipped. I heard the blows of heavy on the goads upon the backs of my brethren distinctly. Of heavy ox goads. What are ox goads? What is an ox goad? G-O-A-D. It's a traditional farming tool used in ancient agrarian societies to guide and prod oxen during plowing and transportation. A 6 to 8 foot long wooden stick with a pointed iron or metal tip at one end. Do they have any images, please? No, those are just oxes. Is that an ox goad? No. I suppose it's something like this. If you can see the guy with the... looks like a flail almost. So just a long stick. So they were taking that and whipping them with it, and especially if it was heavy blows like that, that would be hard. The same village was attacked again on November 4th. In preparation, the mob met 2 miles west of the Big Blue River at the store of Moses Wilson's A Restless Partisan, said John C. McCoy, where Wilson regularly formed plans and organizations to raid upon Mormon settlements. From the store, the mob raced west on the main road toward the Whitmer settlement. Near the Whitmer family neighborhood, the mob, bearing guns and pitchforks, confronted an arriving Mormon group from the west, and a clash followed, known as the Battle Above the Blue. The skirmish left the 2 of the mob and a Mormon dead, and several on both sides wounded, including Wilson's son. Meanwhile, in November 1st at Independence... Oh, jeez. I'm trying to figure out, like... Wait a minute. So they attacked the village again. The mob met 2 miles west of the Big Blue at the store of Moses Wilson. Wilson regularly formed plans and organized raids upon Mormon settlements. So Moses Wilson was one of the people of Missouri that wasn't part of the church who wanted to raid them. Came near the Whitmer family neighborhood. Mormon is dead, and wounded Wilson, the store owner of Missouri. Oh, jeez. Why? Oh, you're going to go to the courts about this? All right, fine. Let's start killing you. Meanwhile, on November 1st at Independence, a mob damaged Mormon houses, shops, and A. Sidney Gilbert's brick store. The following day, a mob attacked the Blue River branch, taking over the ferry, destroying houses, and beating David Bennett. On November 5th, just west of the Temple lot, a confrontation occurred between the Mormons and the state militia under the command of Colonel Thomas Pitcher. The militia, on the pretext of maintaining order, confiscated the guns of the Mormons, as Lieutenant Governor Lilburn W. Boggs, a town resident, looked on. Once the Mormons were defenseless, the citizens began to drive them from the county. Do you want to know why there's a Second Amendment? Because as soon as you disarm one group, it doesn't matter what group, you can now kill them. Completely and utterly, without recourse.
Hey, Dad.
Love you, dear. Once the Mormons were defenseless, the citizens began to drive them from the county. The settlers were aggressors so far as overt acts were concerned, said John C. McCoy. The fact is, he continued, the Mormons received at the hands of their gentle neighbors very harsh treatment. It was cruel. Expulsion from Jackson County comes next. It's a little shorter, but I'm going to call it here for now. Next is the expulsion from Jackson County. I think they're going to detail more of what's going on. So remember, this was from summer of 1833 to nearing winter of 1833. So all it took was Mormons first arrived in... The first missionaries arrived in January 1831. They start trying to preach to the Native Americans. They're told no by a bureaucrat for whatever reason. You'd have to read into it what you will, whether it's he's just doing his job or he's a small tyrant. That's up to you. But it is reading into what's there. There is nothing to say what his motivations were. At the same time, the saints start gathering because they know it's Zion. They want it to be the great and wonderful city that they all hope it to be. They start gathering in force from 400 to 1,200 in under 2 years. That's a lot of people, especially in a small town. Imagine you are in a very small town where there's maybe 800 people. That's really not a lot, right? But suddenly you have 400 more people move in. That means 1/3 of you are suddenly this new group. And then by the time that they're 1,200, they now outnumber you. And yeah. Imagine being so culturally different and feeling so abhorrent to their intrusion, just revolted at them coming and being there and disrupting everything that you had going. People being presumptuous about how, when you're already on a bad track, anything that someone does becomes an annoyance. This is why we make jokes about, oh, they squeeze the toothpaste from the middle of the tube, or when they're eating their cereal, they crunch too loudly. I've had that happen. I've had a mission companion who, he took something that I said extremely wrong, and he hated me to the point that he hated how I chewed my cereal. And so I had to chew silently. When you're on a bad path, anything that you do is wrong. So even if that brother from the church was just saying, hey, yeah, Lord's going to give this all here. Eventually we'll have this. For him, he may have just been stating something as, this is so cool. Hey, come join it. I have no idea. There's no way to know. Obviously, the person who heard it was not enthusiastic. So the question is was it meant to be like, we're going to be here and this is part of my inheritance and I'm going to get your stuff anyway? It could be that way. Or it could just be like, yeah, this land's going to be part of my inheritance and so it's going to come into my hands. It could be innocently. It could be antagonistically. We don't know. But the person who received it sure didn't like it, because even if it was meant to be innocent, they sure didn't take it that way. So what does this mean? How do we present ourselves? For some people, we can see that there's a recurring person who's been keeping their journal, who said they were good neighbors, but this is what they did. So we can be good neighbors to people, but we really should be showing that love and concern for our fellow man. I don't know. There's a lot to think about. I'll have to concentrate on it and come up with better understanding of what's really going on. Because just how violent it turned in such a short time, and especially after they started seeking legal redress, is just, I don't know how to look at it from their point of view other than just going that they just hated them coming, and because of that hatred, they acted on it. I don't know if there's more to it than that. That's rough. I want to understand their point of view. At the same time, I don't know, I have a totally different perspective than those people at that time, because I don't know, I live in this beautiful time where I have very little struggle and strife, and so it's just like, yeah, if my city or town, but I live in a big city, so I don't think it could be completely overrun. If I go to a small town and it's suddenly overrun by a completely different set of people, maybe do everything I can legally, but then just, maybe it'll be time to move out. Who knows? And unfortunately, there are stories that are like that. There's no easy answers in this. So it's something I'm going to have to ruminate on for a while. But more than anything, I just sit here and think about, is there a way that the saints could have done better? Yeah, I think so. Could the same thing happen again? Yeah, I think so. And if that starts to happen again, how would you address it now? That's the thing that I want to figure out. Well, I hope the Spirit's with you today. I hope you'll remember Jesus Christ and everything he's done for you. I hope we can be grateful to him so his Spirit can attend you and he can guide you in how to make your life better. You can find the peace that you need. And just knowledge that we really should treat each other as kindly as possible. May be with you.